Today we're taking a look at the newest release from River Distilling Company, their single barrel cask strength wheated bourbon. Stick around, we're diving into the video right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. So some of the details on this whiskey. So as I had mentioned, we're talking about, again, their newest release, the single barrel cask strength wheated bourbon. This was coming in at 116.6 proof. Mash bill on this one's going to come in at 71% corn, 21% wheat, 9% malted barley. It is non-age stated, but they've indicated that the ages are a minimum of 5 years old. And the MSRP on this one's going to be right around $60. Now with this release here in 2025, they have limited these single barrels to upwards of 100 barrels. So overall, a relatively small or minimum amount of bottles that will be available. But I'm sure as this kind of builds and grows, this will become a little bit more popular. This will just kind of continue to get ramped up a little bit more. Slowly but surely, more barrels will be released in different years. So with that, let's go ahead and kind of dive into the video today. First, we'll start with the color. As you can see, kind of a nice, medium mahogany, kind of copper type of color. Moving the whiskey as I like to do, just to kind of see what some of the oils are going to show on the glass. Pretty darn nice, to be honest. Actually, pretty thick on the glass from what I can see. I don't know if it's translating over to the camera or not, but overall, really, really nice kind of oils and legs running on the glass. So let's go ahead and dive into the nose and see what this one's going to give us. Boy, so right away, my very first impression is this baked apple pie. Nice kind of cinnamon, vanilla, caramels, things along those lines. Yeah, more cinnamon really kind of jumping out of the glass at this point. It's really kind of spice driven, so a lot of spice on the nose so far. Also picking up a little bit of this kind of orange vanilla combo. So maybe a vanilla orange kind of candy, something along those lines. Even with it being semi-spicy, there is that kind of sweetness backbone to it so far. Yeah, just as I kind of continue to nose it, more of that spice really kind of continues to build. And I think that's kind of a false perception of wheated bourbons, is that they're always soft and sweet and they don't have a lot of the spice and things along those lines. But it really couldn't be any further from the truth. And this is kind of a perfect example of that. It's very, very spice driven so far. Maybe even a little hint of like a cocoa powder. Yeah, the orange is starting to, I think, mingle a little bit here with the barrel. More of the barrel influence that's coming out. So the orange and barrel kind of come across as a little bit of like a burnt orange or like an orange zest with a little bit of kind of char behind it. Maybe a little hint of some dark fruits, but I wouldn't say it's something that's predominant or there in the forefront. It's maybe a little bit more subtle. But overall, I think as the spice kind of continues to build along with that kind of orange, yeah, I would say so far a really nice kind of nose. I don't know if it would necessarily lend itself to a nose of a wheated bourbon. I'm not getting a lot of those kind of typical wheated notes so far. Right now, it just kind of comes across as a very tried and true, very solid, very well-balanced nose so far. So with that, let's go ahead and see what this one's going to give us on the palate. Cheers. Today's video is sponsored by Lytmi, an over-the-ear earbud so extremely light you won't even know you have it on. Perfect for when you're working out like I'm doing now, listening to your favorite music, podcasts, or when you're watching all those My Bourbon Journey videos. Now, let's talk a little bit about the sound. The sound on these is absolutely fantastic. Great highs, great mids, great lows, and a really nice amount of bass, allowing for whatever it is that you're listening to sound exactly how you want it to. Now, is using these difficult? It's not difficult at all. Everything is going to be right at the tip of a finger. Whether it's your left hand or right hand, you're going to make all of your adjustments right there. So volume up, volume down, track forward, track back, pause. It's as easy as a press of a finger. Now, most importantly, how do you get these? Check out the link in the description below. That down there is going to allow you to save 10% off your order. Last time they sold out. Make sure you get on this and get these again before they sell out this time. Again, save 10% off your order with the link in the description below. I have to say a big thank you to Lytmi for sponsoring today's video. Now back to the workout. So very similar to the nose. The spice factor on this is absolutely incredible. Blending again with that oak, a little bit of that orange. So the combo of that becomes this kind of charred orange candy. I would say on the palate, it does give you a little bit more of the impression of it being a wheated bourbon, a little bit more as it kind of sits on the palate, a little bit more of that wheat grain starts to kind of show up. Maybe kind of like I don't want to quite say like a frosted flake, but something along those lines. There are the vanillas and caramels that are there, but it's not overly heavy on the vanillas and caramels so far on the palate. But that orange and char and spice are three things that are really, really standing out to me on this one so far. Now here, I would say as we get into kind of the second sip, a little bit more of that vanilla custard and caramel is starting to kind of come out a little bit. I think I just needed to get a little bit more on the palate, let it kind of start to develop a little bit, but completely all the way through, that spice factor has continued to linger and really allows for, you know, the finish part of it to kind of continue to feel long. So as I sip on it and it just sits on the palate, like it's still kind of going for days. So that oak and the spice, vanillas, caramels, a little bit of that orange and oak are kind of continuing to linger quite a bit actually. For a wheated bourbon, this to me has much more of a darker profile. Less of that like wheated backbone that you oftentimes get where it's a little bit more kind of grain forward. This has a darker, richer kind of profile. It feels like it's drinking a little bit higher in age and really, to be honest, not as much like a wheated bourbon as maybe I've had with some others in the past. And it's kind of interesting because oftentimes the wheaters, I think for a lot of people, that like wheat grain overall is what becomes slightly off-putting or just different from the standpoint of a rye-based bourbon. So this really kind of fits, I guess I'll say almost in the middle. It's not giving you all of those wheated notes, and it's not quite drinking like a rye-based bourbon. It's kind of a blend of both where you're not overly focusing on either one. And really what you're ultimately focusing on is the fact that it's just a really nice single barrel. And again, those are going to vary as it being a single barrel. But again, this one that we're talking about here, it just becomes a very easy sipping, very approachable cask strength single barrel, you know, wheated bourbon. Yeah, I had mentioned it on the nose before, a little bit of chocolate or like a cocoa powder. That starts to kind of set up a little bit, works really well with like the oak, a little bit of that orange zest that's still there, or burnt orange, whatever you want to call it. Spice is continuing to just linger. It is an absolutely beautiful balance of the spice and the sweetness and really kind of layers, which is really, really nice. And I think it's just a signifier of this particular barrel just being a really, really nice one. So again, with them only releasing 100 barrels this year, you know, I'm sure again, as I had mentioned before, as this kind of continues to become more popular and build, they'll more than likely introduce, you know, more barrels, you know, to the program, getting them out there to the general public, you know, even more. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this cask strength wheated bourbon really kind of starts to develop and work its way, you know, into the market. As I had mentioned before, the fruit part of it kind of starts to mingle in or work its way or kind of be, implemented into this kind of late for me. And it's there. It just, again, like I had mentioned, it feels like darker, deeper, richer, which oftentimes comes from a lot of the rye-based bourbons versus like a wheated bourbon. You get that kind of soft, maybe more wheat grain profile. But this one so far is drinking much more, aged, less like a wheated bourbon, less kind of grainy, and just more kind of developed, if hopefully that makes sense. Now, if there is going to be any like wheat factors to this for me, it does feel where that is much later, much more as the finish kind of really starts to develop or is almost starting to kind of fade out, is really when you'll start to pick up maybe some of those subtle, cereal grain type of notes that you will oftentimes get from a wheated bourbon. But really, overall, I mean, I think what they've done with this is pretty nice. I think Green River has been one of those brands that has focused very heavily on not only the quality of the whiskeys that they're pumping out, but the price point that they're also, extending with these whiskeys. And it's what's really making these feel like, in my opinion, a really nice value. I mean, a cask strength wheated bourbon for $60, minimum of 5 years old. I think in today's day and age, for what you're getting, the quality of that whiskey, it feels like it is as much of a value, but like right where it should be. Like this just feels like a very good place to be with this whiskey. So, obviously you can see this was a sample that was sent to me by Green River. So, again, this is my opinion. And I think for people who, enjoy, let's say, bourbon in general, but maybe have a tendency to lean away from wheated bourbons, I think this might ultimately fall into a category of something that you'll enjoy. Now, if you do enjoy wheated bourbons, I think you'll also enjoy this as well. But for me, I don't get as much of that wheated profile as maybe I expected. And oftentimes it's too much with some other whiskeys. So maybe overall, this is just a better representation of what a wheated bourbon should taste like. So, would I recommend it? Yes, I think at the price point, the quality of the whiskey, what the availability, maybe now or will be, I would say, if you're a fan of what Green River, has done and is doing, give it a try. I think this will be something that you'll truly, truly enjoy. And more importantly, if you have had this, I would love to know your thoughts overall. So make sure you leave a comment below. Let me know, if you have had this one or if you're, looking for it, whatever it may be. I'd love to hear your feedback on these particular whiskeys. So with that, thanks guys so much for tuning in today. Greatly appreciated. Again, we highlighted the newest release from Green River, their cask strength wheated bourbon. Again, 116.6 proof. Really, really nice overall wheated bourbon. So with that being said, thank you guys again for tuning in today. If you'd like to follow me, you can on Facebook and Instagram, both of those places at My Bourbon Journey. If you'd like to help support the channel and become part of the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club, make sure you check out that Patreon link in the description below. That down there with a lot of other great things for you as well. So on that note, again, remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. We'll see you next time. Cheers.